Hey, welcome to another lecture series video. And this time I'd like to challenge you a little bit on when the Viking Age actually started. And this is an interesting debate, a very intriguing one, in fact, that's going on in Scandinavia at the moment. First off, before we get started, thanks if you want to check out my Patreon page. I put out some exclusive content there also, so it's not only videos on this YouTube channel. That's because a lot of you have asked for exclusive content from expeditions and, well, other stories, and I'd like to share that in a more clan kind of community. That'd be nice, so we're creating that now on Patreon. Let's get right to it now. I'll share my screen here now with you guys. Did the Viking Age last 1,000 years? Let's get to it. For the past 2 years in Scandinavia, the past 3 years actually, we've had this interesting debate about the Viking Age, when it actually started. And this has to do with the Vikings themselves, but also to do with new research, which I will present here now fairly soon. So Vikings, they were so much more than wild warriors, murderers, and pillagers, and which has been the popularized version in the more recent tradition. Current research focuses much more on Vikings as traders and settlers, and migrants also, and travelers, and then when we do that, something really interesting happens in our understanding of them. In addition, there are researchers such as myself, I'm a historian, right, who start to view the concept of time and place, meaning geography, distance, in a whole new manner, more the way it probably was viewed back then. And this is important because that changes also a lot in our concept of the Vikings and the times before and after. We can start here now in Denmark. That's where the debate started. This one historian, he went out and said, "Goodbye, farewell," it says here, to the Viking Age. I'm sorry, this is a little bit, some of these articles are in Norwegian that I'm showing you now, and I'll translate where it's relevant. They're in Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish because the debate is in Scandinavia, so I hope you'll forgive me. But here it says farewell to the Viking Age, and he was criticized very much. He tried to, follow up on that tradition, the Marxist tradition among historians in Scandinavia, who had tried to push down the Vikings as something extreme that we should not care about, or it's not relevant today. And this has only made Vikings more popular, so it hasn't worked at all. And this guy followed up in that. But then researchers in Denmark came out and said, no, we shouldn't give the Viking Age a new name. We shouldn't do stuff like that. Come on, leave it alone. And then this one researcher, Mats Ravn, he went out and said, the Viking Age, it really started in the Iron Age. And here we come to the point, because they can't in Denmark really see much difference if you look on Vikings in the way I described it earlier now, and not as these pillagers, the way the monks wanted. I'll get to that, why they wrote this about Vikings, but that's the depiction, right? That's the extreme depiction. And it turns out there was so much more and interesting and in a modern sense, intriguing ways to look at the Vikings. And we should do that instead of having these horrible depictions. So in Sweden, they followed up. Researchers in Sweden, they went out and said, we can't see much difference either from the time period before the Viking Age, which is called the Vendel period. As you can see here, it's extremely rich in animal art, on copper alloyed objects. They have gold gubbar, it says here, gold men, you can see up on the right here. But then if you saw this movie, The Dig, the helmet there from Sutton Hoo, this helmet you see here is from Sweden in this Vendel period. And the thing is, there has unquestionably been a lot of trade and movement before the Viking Age in eastern and southern directions from Sweden in many directions. And the earliest Viking raids in the Baltic actually started several decades before the official start of the Viking Age in 793, when the monastery of Lindisfarne in England was attacked. And of course, the Vikings did pillage both in England and Ireland prior to the Lindisfarne attack, which in reality, that Lindisfarne, the monastery attack, that was a strategic raid against Charlemagne. I've spoken a lot about that in other videos as well. And we should bear that in mind, not watch that first season of Vikings to, they don't know about the Angles and Saxons and they didn't understand each other. Man, that's ridiculous. That's still a continuation of that depiction that we've been experiencing since for the past few decades. It's changed now. The thing is, in Norway, where I live, we're always some way behind the Danes and Swedes on these larger debates. But thankfully, this issue has been raised in our country as well. In the middle of Norway, we now find I'm sorry, I went too quickly here now. I wanted just to tell you because I want to take this debate further back in time. And I see archaeologists like Christian Christensen here. He went out on Swedish TV 2 years ago, sort of like a part of this debate also, about this debate. Here it says, the more we learn about the Bronze Age, the more we see it was a very advanced society. And in the same program, another archaeologist says that we think the system that we see in the Viking Age are put at sea, as they say, but meaning comes from the Bronze Age. And even Christian Christensen, who's the most prominent archaeologist in Scandinavia at the moment, he says, in principle, Viking society was founded in the Bronze Age. So let's bear that in mind before we move on. So in the middle of Norway, this debate here, it says, we have to reconsider the middle of Norway called Lada and its part in Norwegian history. And that has something to do that we find extensive trade and industrial scale production of whetstones, stones to sharpen tools and weapons in all of Scandinavia, going all the way back to the early 700s, much before the Viking Age. And large scale trade of both whetstones, iron, and undoubtedly other valuables such as skin and tusk, and well, much before that, centuries before that. We know that. And we also know the Bronze Age, the Nordic Bronze Age, had made Scandinavia into one of the richest areas of all of Europe. And to add to that fact, the exotic goods from the north of Norway are traded along the same trading route eastward into Sweden for centuries prior. I'll show it here in this. I showed this in my lecture series video last week also, this same map here, but this is so under-communicated, and even scholars that I talk with, they agree with this. This should come more out to light, because this trading route eastwards into Sweden went on for centuries prior to the Viking Age. Instead of going down the malicious Norwegian coastline with their trading goods and their expensive shiploads, they went down into the Baltic Sea, where the amber trade went straight down into the Roman Empire. And this is very important to know. As you may know, in Scandinavia, we were self-sufficient with iron and making weapons and tools out of iron, not like in the Bronze Age, where you had to have these extensive trading networks to produce metal, good metal. And the thing is here now, we have a problem, I think, in the way everything has been divided in this. As you see the timeline here, you have the late Iron Age, the early Iron Age, the Roman Iron Age, the Vendel migration period, the Germanic period. There's so many different periods, as you see here, and it's a tad confusing now when we're trying to open our eyes and look and to understand history in new ways. This is good if you want to really dive into it, and if you want to think like an archaeologist looking at artifacts and stuff like that, because it comes like that. And this put up this simple timeline of human history, but you see the Mesolithic, the Neolithic, the Bronze Age, Iron Age, and there you see the Saxons and Vikings in medieval period. Thing is, it's all so connected with all this new research now, and that's important to know. except for one thing. There's a discontinuity here now. And we should know about this discontinuity, because that's something that destroys this a little bit. We had some great disasters. The late Bronze Age collapse, for example. Something happened there for a few centuries. And the same with the Fimbul winter of 536 and the little Ice Age, as they call it, from 536. Yes, this I'll rephrase myself for now. The Fimbul winter was something the Vikings and everyone in the north of Europe knew very well about. Winter for 3 years continuously, right? And this incident in 536, linked with the plague that came in 541, which is sort of like it was a bubonic plague, a distant big brother, I guess, to the Black Plague, and this mini ice age was started by some volcanic eruptions also. Thing is, here in this paper that is referred to here, the mini ice age lasted for about 125 years, and also the plague at the same time was recurrent, and it had causing outbreaks every few years until the year 750 about. So there you have the discontinuity, and that's what I see when I look at the historical sources, trying to look through this. It's like looking through distorted glass back in time and trying to understand and put this whole mosaic puzzle back together again, and how things were before that. And with this, well, I would like to say, if it hadn't been for the impact of this plague and the mini ice age in the years 536 to 750, then it would have been close to impossible for us to differentiate between the Goths, Vandals, Lombards, Angles, Jutes, Herulds, Rugians, and many other tribes out of Europe and in Northern Europe, with the later Vikings and the Normans. And the area these early warriors of the north included lands on both sides of the Baltic, and Saxons and Frisians and Burgundians and Franks. I mean, they were all connected. And if it hadn't been for this discontinuity, our memories of the ancient past wouldn't have faded way backwards in time in this way, that now leaving us with this distant, distorted, remnants of memories. And the Fimbul winter is a good idea, because we didn't know about this until a few years ago, the year 536, and the volcanic eruptions. It's been a huge mess. But finally, through new research and new technologies, it's not possible to solve more parts of this puzzle of the past. And it's really not that crazy if one were to argue that the Viking Age started in the year 9, as you see here, when tribes from Scandinavia and Northern Europe annihilated 3 Roman legions in the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, led by Hermann, as he was called in the 19th century, Arminius, of the Cherusci tribe, who was related to the Svevi, and most likely worshipped the god Tyr, which is our namesake of Tuesday, of course. And he could possibly have been a Jotun giant, been worshipping, Jotun giant Ymir, that the Cherusci had a close relationship to. And the onslaught from the year 9 and onwards, along with all the migrations and control of trade routes which followed, are pivotal at a time when tribes and groups of Europe from Scandinavia and Northern Europe would travel southwards in Europe to conquer, settle, serve, and also for some time return northwards, as we see in some papers, some DNA papers, and settle back in Scandinavia. So this is quite interesting to know. Here you see this is from Tacitus, I think, when he wrote about this battle of the Teutoburg Forest and how it looked in the years after with the different tribes. But now we also see, here it says, was there a Viking Age in Norway 2,000 years before the Vikings? And now researchers are even beginning to look at the Bronze Age and similarities there. And remember, I told you the late Bronze Age collapse was also a discontinuity, and there was also some climate change there, a cold period. at the same time. So yeah, you have that same kind of discontinuity. Look at these ships, these rock carvings, right? You find it all over Scandinavia. The EBA at the top left here, that's the early Bronze Age and the late Bronze Age. You see the ships were bigger, larger in the early Bronze Age, and then later in the Bronze Age they were more detailed in the sense you see with weapons. You had these ceremonial helmets with horns. It was not used in battle, of course, and you see the stavner on the fore and back end of the ships there, and this one ship here. Man, that's incredible. This rock carving is incredible. It's really, really big. But they're seeing ships of such size, and these researchers are now wondering if they traveled all the way to the south of Europe on rivers, or because it was possible. So that's something that we will maybe find out in a few coming years. What happened here? Is this a battle depicted? I don't know. Here you can see the different time periods going backwards in time through the Bronze Age. On the top there, with this really large ship, and down, as you see here, the rock carvings, which are dated, become smaller and smaller. And then in the pre-Roman Iron Age, at the bottom there, you find rock carvings of even smaller. And this fits with the whole discontinuity also, which I've described here, which is quite interesting to know. So with the current debate and new evidence and new eyes on both time and distance, did the Viking Age last just a few hundred years, or 1,000 years, or more? You decide for yourself. That's my opinion, and let's wait for more research and discuss this more also. And that's all I got for today, and thanks for your time.